You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Welcome to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Hey, I'm excited to have my guest in the studio. Mr. Corey Saffold, Officer Corey Saffold from the Madison Police Department is my special guest. But before I get into a more extensive introduction, I do something that's called the Black Icebreaker. So first of all, I want to say, Mr. Saffold, Officer Saffold, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. I got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
All right, man. Growing up, did you eat grits or cream of wheat?
Grits.
What was your favorite cereal?
Frosted Flakes.
Did you have a Jerry curl?
I tried, but my hair was a bit too coarse.
So you couldn't do that.
So it wouldn't take.
Who was your favorite, or what was your favorite, or your first professional concert? First concert that you went to?
My first professional concert was Fred Hammond.
Really?
And Radical for Christ.
Oh,
yes,
man, that's exciting. That's exciting. Who's the better dancer, Michael Jackson or Prince?
Michael Jackson.
Really? That's interesting. Now, and you're not going to side with Prince, although you're a bass player. He was lead guitar.
A lot of musicians absolutely love Prince. They're like Prince everything. I am a musician. However, I look at the big picture too.
Gotcha.
And looking at the big picture, I'm going to have to go with Michael Jackson, MJ.
All right. Is there anyone in your family named either Mookie, Junebug, or John John?
No. Nope.
What's the craziest nickname that one of your cousins has?
I got a cousin named Nickel. Just call him Nickel.
Can you swim?
Yes.
All right. Let me see. Did you call your grandmother Big Mama, Grandma, Medea? What did you call your grandmother?
Grandma.
Really, on both sides?
Yep. Grandma. Yep.
Grandma. Okay, so you're a traditional.
Yep.
All right. Now, you said you tried to do a Jerry curl, but it didn't take. Did you ever have your hair blown out or just otherwise permed?
No. I had a Gumby. When I had a hair that was on the slant.
Remember the Gumby?
I had that, and I had a step, but I didn't have it. No perm.
Was that back like in the Kid and Play days?
Yeah,
that's your era.
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay. All right, I guess we've broken enough for that black ice. I met my guest years ago when he came to town to really study media. It's a program that was called the Madison Media Institute.
Yep.
And so I met Officer Saffold really as a musician. We had some mutual friends. In fact, his cousin officiated at my wedding 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we worked together for years. In fact, if you love the intro and outro music, this is the gentleman who produced it. So in addition to other things, he's a police officer. He's been protecting our fair city for about 10 years. But he's also a musician. He's a band leader. He's a public speaker. I've been following you and reading up on the fact that you've been talking about the paradox of being a black police officer, and that's actually one of the specific things I want to talk to you about today. But you've just been helping to keep our streets safe, and I know that's been really tricky in the last several years. Yeah. And so, Officer Saffold, I really want to welcome you to Black Like Me, and thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks for having me.
Man, you know what? I love the fact that you're out on the speaking circuit. You know, I've been looking at pictures of you giving talks, even outside of Madison.
Right. Yeah.
Was it Black? It's not Black Earth. There was some small community I thought I saw a picture of. Was it Middleton or something? I mean, you're doing things outside of the Madison area.
There's a few that I've been to. I've been to. So some of the kind of interesting places that I've been to is like Sparta and Manitowoc.
Manitowoc. That must be what I'm thinking about.
Right. Manitowoc was a little scary to drive through at night by myself.
Sure.
But yeah, it's been interesting. Sparta, Manitowoc, La Crosse, Eau Claire, Milwaukee a few times,
right.
Waukesha, Sheboygan.
Right.
Yeah, so quite a few places. Platteville. I mean, it's in Wisconsin, so it's a partnership with Wisconsin Humanities Council.
Sure.
And their Shop Talk program to talk about what work means to you. And they tapped me and asked me to do this. The speaker thing, and they asked me, what would I talk about? And I'm like, what would I talk about as it relates to my job? Well, we got a lot going on right now with policing, so I'm going to talk about the paradox of being a black police officer.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation because over the past several years, you and I have talked about music, bands, vocals, jingles, art. But this is my first time having an extensive conversation with you about what this paradox is like. I mean, I
Right.
followed your career. I was at your graduation
Absolutely.
ceremony, and we go way back. You know, I've officiated stuff in your family's life.
Right.
Dedicated your son. I mean, so there's so many places where our lives have intersected. But I realize, it still surprises me when I see you in a uniform,
Right.
and not just with drumsticks or with with a bass guitar.
Right.
But man, you get up every day thinking that you could lose your life protecting me or folks in this studio.
Yep.
Man, what's that like? I mean, you get up every day and put on equipment,
Right.
knowing that you may not come home to see your family, and it's somewhat thankless because everyone does not necessarily see you in the most positive lens. What's that like every day, getting up knowing that you're protecting people who already have their minds made up about you?
Right. Well, I try not to think about that part in terms of I could lose my life. But I'm ready though. I'm ready to, because I started thinking a lot about the Parkland shooting in Florida.
Yeah.
And being a school officer for some years, I started thinking about what I would do. And
You did that for 4 years, right? At a local high school?
Right. Yep, at Madison West High School. I love that position. But as I began to think about what I do in that situation, I realized that because of the relationships that I've built in that school with the students, with the staff, I would have quickly, without any thought, ran in there and did my best to protect every person in that school. And so
You wouldn't have run out. You wouldn't have stayed outside. Listen, and this isn't radio, so we can talk honestly.
no, absolutely, I'm for being honest. No, absolutely not. Wouldn't have stayed outside. I often question how that happened, and I've been following that story. And
Was that a white officer?
It was a white officer.
Come on, if that was a black officer and didn't go inside. I'm not sure. Let me try.
No.
Come on, if that was a black officer and a bunch of white kids are getting shot inside the school and he's outside, he or she's outside, man, this would have been a whole different. We would have known that officer's face, their story, their history, their mama's name, their babysitters, where they buy lunch meat.
Especially their history, especially any previous incidents with that officer. All of that would have come to
It would have
light.
come out.
This story, he told this side of the story, so his face is kind of being seen now. The sheriff laid into him, and he's still trying to defend himself. But I mean, if I'm able to speak honestly, that was just a poor job of following his training. We have active shooting training, which is completely different from any other training. And active shooter training says you need to go inside and stop the threat at all costs. You're the only person there with the gun. You need to do your job. If that means you're losing your life, I mean, what's tricky to me is that I'm not even thinking about what can happen to me, because I'm thinking about the people that I need to save. Right. Because if you have relationships with these people, you like, man, my students are in there. My friends are in there.
Right.
I'm the first line of defense for all of them. So I'm running in there. I don't know how that
What's
didn't
going
happen.
on with them?
And I know, I don't know if it was a position for them where he was just kind of trying to skate off into retirement or what
don't know
have
the
you.
background.
But
You said something, officer, that's really important. You and I are part of this Kids versus Cops basketball tournament that's happened. This is going to be the fourth one, I think, this year.
Yes.
And so when you're out there, because you're playing the basketball team,
Right.
And but I see you and the students talking junk to each other, and it's all in fun. I mean, the whole idea is that we want to build stronger relationships. But you know these kids,
Right.
So they walk up to you. So you're right. You're outside. You hear shooting, you don't go in. And again, my purpose is not to demonize the individual, but the purpose of Black Like Me is to at least give listeners a perspective of a black person, at least one black male. This is what I think when I watch this.
Right.
White officers are scared of black people, so they shoot them and say, "I felt threatened." But you feel threatened, and you don't go in and shoot a white shooter. I mean, again, when they hear let me be fair, they didn't know what color the shooter was.
Right.
But by and large, we hear school shootings, we think troubled white teens.
Absolutely.
But I'm saying, with all the shootings of people, because I felt afraid, particularly in Florida with the stand your ground stuff,
Right.
I'm fearing for my life. You don't go in to shoot an active shooter while kids are being.
I think he froze. I think he froze.
Sure. To all fairness.
No, and I think you're right. I think in most situations, in most cases, if you swap out, a white officer for a black officer, I think the consequences and how people look at that officer are much different than if it were a white officer. I think a clear case for that would be Eric Garner. I think that you swap off that officer and make that a black officer. That black officer is getting fired because he did not follow policy, whereas the officer that broke policy, New York Police Department has a policy that says do not use the chokehold. They have that policy for a reason,
right?
Because you can take someone's life applying the chokehold. That's why it's there. That officer didn't get fired. That officer, didn't even get in trouble in terms of getting indicted or anything. So. Yeah.
And he broke the rule. Not only was the result that Eric Garner died, but he broke a rule.
He broke policy.
Because you told me, man, when you were new in the force, you said if you stopped white people who are walking their dogs, whose dogs weren't on leashes, in a part that clearly says Madison City or whatever city ordinance, whatever, you can't do this, you would tell them to put their dogs on a chain. I don't know if you cited them or not, but they would call your superior and complain because you were doing your job.
No, what you just mentioned is an actual case that happened to me. I was driving down the street and a lady's dog ran right in front of the squad car, and I had to slam on brakes. And so my intention was to, provide some education. Hey, it's not safe. City ordinance does say our dogs should be on leash. Can you please put your dog on a leash? Just how it is. Very professional. No intention on writing a citation or anything like that. And who are you to question me? I'll have your job.
I'll have your job.
And you know what they're getting at when they say I'll have your job. You know exactly what they're suggesting.
Right.
I'll have your job. Who are you to? And she called my supervisor. Because at first I'm thinking like, okay, I'm here giving you a warning, and you just blatantly tell me you're not going to put your dog on a leash.
I'm going to call your boss.
And I'm going to call your boss. So you're telling me as an officer that you're going to disregard this city ordinance that I am responsible for enforcing. So if you're not going to do that, then I'm going to give you a citation. I mean, what else am I supposed to do? And she called my boss.
And you know this because your boss talked to you about it.
Exactly. And I actually got pulled aside
and asked
about it.
See, okay, I'm actually feeling my blood pressure going up right now. I mean, because you getting up, she takes your badge and basically takes your authority. But I mean, when we think about our streets and our communities, regardless of how we feel about it, and of course, a police officer with a badge, we're taught to respect them for no other reason for our own safety, for our lives. But they are a form of authority. This is how I was trained growing up. But I would never think to say something to a police officer in the line of their duty. Now, if they're talking to me disrespectfully or something, I will say, who's your supervisor? Because I happen to know the chief of police. So I'll play that card, that power card. That's not even a black card. That's just a power card. But I would never say to someone who's telling me to turn my music down or put my dog on a leash, I'm going to have your job.
Right. And especially if the officer is very courteous, very professional, and is talking to you, don't have any intentions on giving you a ticket or fine or anything like that. Is just saying, hey, can you, I almost hit your dog. I mean, pretty much what I was saying.
So she threatened an officer. I mean, if she's talking about taking your job, wasn't that threatening you?
I mean, it was threatening me in the sense it wasn't threatening me.
Not bodily harm.
Well, right, yeah. It was a direct threat. It was basically letting me know, like, you are not in any position to tell me what to do.
With my dog. Keep in mind,
remember who you are. Remember that you are black. Remember that I am white. And even though you're wearing that badge, I'm still going to show you that I am in more of a position of power than you are.
And she
even though you're enforcing, and
she proved it.
And she proved that by calling my supervisor, and my supervisor actually calling me in on something this petty. So it was yeah.
Ooh.
It was definitely an eye opener. This was early in my career, so it was definitely an eye opener, and that happened, again, time to time of questioning authority. Or I would be at West High School where I gave my students a lot of second chances. I believe in restorative process. I believe in restorative justice, and I let it play out like that. And there was one time when a man was questioning that. Well, how come this person didn't get arrested? How come this person, kid stole from a co-op, and we set up a plan where they can pay back the co-op the owner, and and pay back his debt, make a wrong right, which is the best resolution. There was one guy questioning whether that person should have been arrested and charged, and all these different things. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to arrest them where you're promoting crime. I don't think so. But it's just interesting how that people that watch you in your position, watch you in your work, and number one, think that they can do it better, and then think that they have more power and authority than you, because that's proven when they try to report you for, well, he's not doing his job, he's not enforcing law. No, actually, I'm applying restorative practices.
Gotcha. No, that's whew. Oh man, this is really interesting. So, what's the hardest part about your job, being a black police officer?
So the hardest part about my job, when I think about that question, is really,
or some of the tough things about your job.
Sure. It's the paradox the talk that I give.
Yeah, tell me about that.
And so the paradox is basically, I come to work every day while watching what's happening nationally. This contention between the black community and police, a contention that started as a result of unarmed African American men being gunned down at the hands of white police officers.
Right.
And so coming to work with that reality every day and watching the frustration and the anger in the Black community continue to build.
And it is building.
Right, and it continues to build because the more you have these incidents and the officer is not held accountable, the angrier and more frustrated, the Black community becomes. But then I have to put on this uniform as a Black man, go to work, and represent an organization, an idea that historically has mistreated Black people.
Right.
From
Like, we're not making that up. I mean, that's history.
Fact. Yeah,
that's fact.
Absolutely. From the beginning of slavery all throughout the prison system. And so then it becomes, how do I number one, how do I just basically just do my job in a way where I am not categorized as a sellout, Uncle Tom, coon, or you just trying to make the white man happy? How do I just do my job where I'm not looked at as that? And then how do I then begin to, number one, bring awareness, to my white colleagues that, Black Lives Matter exists for a reason.
Right.
There's a lot of validity in that, and which is exactly why we shouldn't say Blue Lives Matter. I don't believe in saying Blue Lives Matter because I think it's a slap or an insult in the face to Black Lives Matter, because that came about for
That's a powerful
reason.
statement for you as an officer to say. That's powerful.
Absolutely, and I say that in my talks, and I mean that we should not say Blue Lives Matter, because to me it's an insult to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a slap in their face because they came into existence to bring awareness to a very real problem. We already know all lives matter. There's no need for us to keep saying that, repeating that over and over just to combat this movement. This movement started because it was particularly Black men, African American, and people who were gunned down by a white officer. So it's a very specific reason that they came into existence, and we need to acknowledge that. I mean, it doesn't take anything away from us to simply acknowledge that there's some validity in that.
That's all we need to do. And because this show invites non-Black listeners to understand this perspective, I just want to just replay this and say this for our non-Black listeners, particularly our white listeners. When Officer Saffold says what he says, he's not saying that this means open season on police officers. So don't start Googling him and calling his superiors. What he's saying is that we know that all lives matter. He's a police officer. He knows that their lives matter. But stating that Black Lives Matter is a response to the senseless shooting of unarmed Black men.
Absolutely.
And Black men need to be arrested if they commit crimes or serious crimes. There's a due process. We're talking about unarmed people being shot, men stealing cars and fleeing the scene and being shot in their back, men being shot and having weapons put on them.
Absolutely.
So what we're saying is we're trying to show that there seems to be a disregard for Black lives by shooting Black men and then having, I guess it's called a due process, but that these officers are not being indicted. They're being free. They're going right back to their jobs and their positions. So I just wanted to add that the show exists so that white people can listen in on our conversations and understand what we're saying differently. My brother's a police officer. You're a police officer. I don't think that police officers should be targets, but we have a problem in this country, and Black men seem to be in the crosshairs of these in this situation, and we have to acknowledge that.
We have to acknowledge it, and like you said, we're talking about the Tamir Rices, the Walter Scott, the LeVar Jones. These are
Tony
Robinson
here in our city.
These are cases, with the exception of Tony Robinson. These are other cases that I thoroughly researched, because Tony Robinson is hard when you have two people in an isolated room in an isolated area. You're gonna have two people who gonna know that story.
Right.
And so how do you get to the,
and one of them is dead, so he can't tell his part.
Exactly. How do you get to the bottom of that? Whereas the cases that I've researched, number one, there's video for it.
So Tamir Rice, Eric Gardner,
Walter Scott. Walter Scott is a big one that I use in my talks.
Sure.
And
what do you say about Walter?
So Walter Scott, in case people don't know, Walter Scott is a situation where Officer Michael Slager pulled over Walter Scott for a broken tail light.
Right.
And when he pulled it over off camera, there was some sort of a struggle that happened off camera, and Walter Scott ran. And instead of chasing him, catching him like he could have done,
like you're trained to do.
Like we're trained to do, because Walter Scott wasn't in the best of shape. If you watch the video, you'll see that.
Sure.
Instead of simply mailing him a citation, because he had his information already, which he could have done, instead of getting back in his car, driving to Walter Scott's house and handing him his citation, he chose to pull out his service weapon and fire 8 rounds into Walter Scott's back until Walter Scott fell to his death. And so when I give my talk, I talk about that and I explain that, and I ask myself as I watch that video, what could have made Officer Slager come to that decision? Why come to the decision
That quickly?
Why come to the decision that quickly to use your deadliest weapon 8 times in someone's back? Where's the threat? Where can you say I feared for my life? Where can you say I was afraid? Where can you say I was threatened? Where can you say that if a person is running away from you and they're several feet away from you?
Right,
By the time you had that 8th round, because the officer was standing still, shooting, aiming, and 8 rounds in the back, Walter Scott dies. And the only conclusion that I could have come up with is that Michael Slager placed a very low value on Walter Scott's life.
Right.
He just didn't value his life.
It wasn't going to matter.
Exactly. That is exactly
one
it.
less thug on the street,
Yep.
one less welfare recipient.
He doesn't have a mom or dad that probably cares about him coming home.
Right.
He wasn't thinking about if he had children. He wasn't thinking about the service that Walter Scott provided,
or the people who loved
to
him.
our country, the people who loved him. That officer, like you just said, it did not matter. This person did not matter. His life did not matter. It was a very low value that he placed on his life. And why I believe that, because I fully believe with my entire heart that if Walter Scott were white, that Michael Slager would not have stood and shot a white man 8 times in the back. He would not have done it.
Come on. We've seen on YouTube white people shoot at officers, spit at officers, swing at officers, and not be shot down.
Right. And so then an officer takes the taser and walks it over to Walter Scott and drops it there, because he's already thinking.
He's already thinking.
The wheels in his
cameras.
Are turning, and he's thinking justification.
Right.
Because he's a police officer. He's thinking, how can I justify what I just did? Because remember, at the time, he didn't know he was being recorded. And so
right.
And so
because this was not his car cam that caught
right. No,
it.
this was somebody who was hiding. It was a witness. Who was recording it. So he didn't know he was being recorded. So it was going to work out to his favor. And if that had not been recorded, he likely would have gotten off. It was going to work to his favor because he was the only one there with Walter Scott. And so he walked that taser over there and dropped it down, because his defense was going to be, he reached for my taser, he tried to use my taser, which would have been a weak defense, because how did he get shot in the back? I mean, a good attorney could have broke that down. However, he was already thinking, how can I justify this act? Because he knew he messed. He knew that,
Exactly.
I don't know if you could use profanity on the show. But,
yeah, you can.
Okay, but he knew that was a bullshit shoot.
Yeah.
He knew that was some garbage. So, yeah.
That's man. Eric Garner, we had. Now I'm trying to remember. Now there's so many. That one we had video of that one too.
Yep.
We had video of that, because he was saying that's where the whole "I can't breathe" movement happened.
And what's interesting about Eric Garner, when I look at that one over and over, is the number of officers that were there.
Yes.
And so my thing is,
it's not. This is against the rule.
Not only do you know it's against the rule, but you don't think you could have taken a step back and come up with a better plan.
Right.
Because keep in mind, the whole contact was over cigarettes. So in New York City, there has to be a lot more going on. But granted,
loose cigarettes on.
Right. But granted, let me put on the officer hat for a minute. Okay. You're an officer. You're there. There's an illegal activity happening. You do have to deal with it. Okay,
Yes.
great. So then let's deal with it. But you can't take a step back and say, hey, officer so-and-so, you grab his legs. Officer so-and-so, you come in, grab his arms. I'm going to grab this. And together, we're going to take him down to the ground. He's a bigger guy, so this is how we're going to handle that situation. You mean all the officers there, you could not come up with a better plan than to violate policy and put them in a chokehold?
And what it makes me think about, Corey, is I'm a history buff. We offer this U.S. Black History course for our non-Black allies. People come by the hundreds to take this 9-week course with us. My undergraduate degree was in this. The whole concept behind lynching was, I'm also a pastor, was behind the punitive measures of crucifixion, to send a message. For insurrectionists, for people that are not doing what we say, we're going to do this to give you a message. Don't play with us. To me, to choke a man like that while police officers were standing around says I'm sending a message, or just an egregious misuse of power and authority. How could you not want to do anything but send a message by doing something like that, because he wouldn't stop doing what you told him?
Because you know what it was? Because in policing, we call it contempt of cop. And contempt of cop basically means I'm only doing this particular act because you didn't do what I told you to do. And so contempt of cop is basically saying...
Say that. Contempt of cop?
Contempt of cop. When somebody's contempt is you refusing to go with a particular order or whatever. And so contempt of cop basically means I'm only doing this particular act because you didn't do what I told you to do.
So I'm gonna put you in your place. I'm gonna show you.
I'm gonna put you in your place. Although a lot of times we have, disorderly conduct, for example. Disorderly conduct is a citation that can be used for a specific matter, but it also can be a more general one. So many times when you don't do what a police officer says, they'll write there's disorderly conduct ticket or arrest.
Right.
And in most cases, when it's frivolous like that, the judge will kick it back down. Was it legal, lawful? Yes. But did it have to happen? No. So in this case with Eric Garner, basically contempt of cop basically means is pride. Here you have, and there's a case.
That's true. I believe that.
Here you have a prideful officer that's upset because the person is not doing what he told them to do. And, you stop selling cigarettes or whatever the verbiage he was giving to Eric Garner. And Eric Garner was like, no, I'm tired of y'all harassing me, leave.
Because he probably does it every day.
Right. And that cop became very prideful. Another example.
But can I throw something? Don't lose that point.
Go ahead.
There was an episode, I think it was called, Tyler, was it Lawn Chair? There's an episode called Lawn Chair on Scandal. Yard Chair, Lawn Chair. But there's a part where a black man was shot by an officer, planted some stuff on him. But this rant of this white officer basically talking about this contempt of the cop. He said, they don't respect the badge. From the time they're 2 to the time they're grown, we get up, we put on our badges, we protect those people, but they don't respect. They tell us, they talk disrespectfully to us. They don't respect the badge. And so he was basically saying, I didn't come out trying to shoot a black male, but things kept escalating because he insulted my pride. Now, granted, the guy should have did what the police officer said, but to end up shooting him, but his justification was they don't respect us.
And that's the thing that we police officers, and I think we're starting to get there, have to understand that we're in a day and age where people are not going to respect the badge because there is
too much history,
and not even just the history, but within just even the last 8 to 5 years, there's so much that has happened that has only added to the anger, the contention, the bitterness of the black community that you can't expect, that we need to go in expecting them to disrespect the badge. Another story that hits dead on with what you're talking about of not respecting the badge is when Jacqueline Craig, when her 8-year-old son was coming home in Fort Worth, Texas, coming home from the store eating candy, and he threw his wrapper on the ground, and the neighbor grabbed him by his neck. Jacqueline called the police. She called Officer Martin, and she said, sir, this man has no right to grab my son. If he has a problem with what happened, he needs to tell me, which is what any parent would say.
Exactly.
Right? The officer said, so she said he needs to tell me. The officer said to her, well, why not? Basically, to her response to, he can't grab my son, the officer responded, why not? Jacqueline Craig said, well, he can't prove that he threw the wrapper. And then she caught herself, which is good. She said, well, it doesn't matter. He cannot put his hands on my son. The officer responded with, why don't you teach your son not to litter? So here you have, let's look at the levels of disrespect in this situation. You have a white officer telling a black woman to do a better job teaching her kid. To do a better job raising her kid. So, and do we give parenting classes in policing now?
That's a lot of responsibility.
I mean, come on, the level of disrespect. And then he basically tells her, she calls someone that's there to protect and to serve. This just happened to me. This offense just happened to me. My son was grabbed by the neck. And your in response is to say, why not? You're basically saying that this white man had the right to grab my 8-year-old son by the neck because he threw a candy wrapper on the ground. And what's crazy is the level of unprofessionalism. You're not there for that. You're there to deal with the issue at hand. First of all, when he got there, he went to talk to the other person first who did not even call the police. And so there was a number of things. And then when Jacqueline Craig realized this was not going in her favor, it was not going her way, she decided she was going to end that contact, which was well within her right because she hadn't broken any laws, violated anything. And then the officer did not even want her to walk away. There was this big old tussle that ended with her getting thrown to the ground, pointing his taser at her daughters, and all of this thing, all because she wanted to walk away from you not helping her. The chief of Fort Worth, who's a black man, said that the officer was unprofessional and unruly, but it wasn't about race. And I completely disagree because I don't believe that if Jacqueline Craig was that officer's peer, another white man, he would have said, do a better job raising your kids. You're not going to stand toe-to-toe with your peer, another white man like that, and say something like that. You did that to her because she was a woman and because she was black.
And you wouldn't have thrown him. You would not have thrown your peer down to the ground. Someone whose life and whose personhood you respected. Did that officer lose their job?
He got suspended, and then later.
Pay?
I have to go back and look and see if he got.
I rarely
suspended.
hear about people being suspended without pay. I bet you it was. But I won't make that assumption.
Right. I think it was without pay. Otherwise, where would the punishment have been with that?
Sure.
But later on, the chief did say he wished that he would have gave him a longer suspension.
Well, sure. After the backlash and everything.
Right. And later on, the same officer said that Jacqueline was becoming disorderly and kept getting loud. Some of the same things that you were saying with they don't respect. Yeah, contempt the cop, or they don't respect the badge. He started having that contempt the cop started rising in him,
definitely.
and that pride started kicking in, and he didn't want her to walk away. She could walk away, especially since you're not being helpful.
Because exactly. So you talk about the paradox of how the black community sees you as a sellout.
Yes.
What's the pressure? And you talked about the attitude of some white citizens who don't want you to talk to them about putting Fido or Spot on a leash.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about police officers, and if you can't talk about that, I get it. But do you feel tension from white police officers that, Corey, who are you going to side up with? Are black officers being asked by their white colleagues? Mm-hmm. Are you blue or are you black? When you go outside, are you with us or are you with your folks? Do people ask you that jokingly, like where your commitment is?
No, it's not that overt. It's not that blatant. No, even
not here.
Right, not here. Even and there may be some people who read the articles I write or see the speaking engagements I give, or that may hear this podcast and may say, who does he think he is?
Right.
But no one even jokingly comes to my face and
that's good.
Questions me like it. And I think for the most part, from what I know, most of my colleagues are supportive.
Sure.
Of what I do,
and that's great.
Because a great deal of what I do is in defense of police. And
you should
to try to add perspective to certain situations, but also in that same conversation. That's why it's the paradox. It's a lot of different ideas and different conflicts going on that I try to wrestle with.
You walk a very fine line. You got to be ballsy to do what you do, though,
It's a very fine line, because you're going to piss off some black people,
right,
or you're going to piss off your coworkers.
And you need both of them for you to come home every night. You need the support of the black community and the officers.
Absolutely.
But I'm a man in my 50s, advanced degree, homeowner, longest standing pastor in my community. But when there was a break-in at our church, I heard somebody throwing some stuff around. There was nobody in the parking lot, nobody, and I was afraid that this person was going to torch our church. It was like 3 weeks before the grand opening. I ran upstairs and called the non-emergency line, but I said, my name is Alex G. I'm a black male. I drive a black Acura. I described myself because by being the only car in the driveway, in the parking lot, I was afraid that 3 or 4 officers would come in and not harass me or beat me down, but they would spend time questioning me rather than going inside the building, stopping someone who I feared was going to vandalize or burn our building down. And so I guess I'm saying that to show that it's not just the kids who have a record and who are in trouble, who have some consternation about police. Because of experiences I had, my first concern was they're going to see me, a black man in a nice car in a parking lot where there was just a disturbance call, and they're going to spend more time finding out who I am and asking me for my identification than getting inside the church, stopping this guy from setting it on fire. But in light of all of that, when I thought that the church might be burned down, I called the police officer. So I want you to know I appreciate what you and officers do, what my brother does, men and women who are protecting us. I really do appreciate it. The unfortunate thing is it's a mixed baggage. So I called the police officers, but one of my friends said, and this actually led to how I ended up writing Justified Anger, was I never think of identifying myself when I called the police. And my thought was, how could you not think of describing yourself? There's no one in this dark parking lot but you. I give my license plate, Corey, the make and model of my car, the color of my car, so that they would know I'm the one that's calling. Don't spend time asking me questions. So I called them for help, but I still buffered myself from the misunderstanding that I look like what some people might think is a criminal profile.
They're still going to spend time asking you questions,
and they did.
And that's the perception that we have to get to, is that not every time an officer is asking you questions is because they're
not accusing me.
Right, they're not accusing. They're not,
right,
because we have certain procedures and policies that we have to follow for an investigation. So to begin with, if I come to what is a burglary at the church, when I get there, and if we think the person is still inside, there's going to be some questions that I'm going to ask you to have a better understanding of what's going inside. Now we're going to clear that church. We're going to make sure we're going to make it safe.
And it did both. Somebody talked to me and somebody went inside. That's all I wanted, was for somebody to get inside.
Right. But the person that's talking to you, or if it was just two officers, they'll clear it and they'll come back and talk to you. They're going to ask you a lot of questions because there's certain report writing that we have to do. So it's going to be, what's your first name, what's your middle initial, what's your last name, date of birth, address. And so you're like, man, why are you asking me all these questions?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times,
and it escalates with me too, because when they're asking that, and if I don't understand this is protocol,
right,
my pride is getting in the way, and I may even ask, well, why are you asking me this question? I made the phone call. So what I got to do is keep in mind that when my pride's kicking in, my voice is getting a little octave higher. I'm talking faster. I'm getting mad because I'm realizing this is not the first time I've been asked these kinds of questions by the police.
Right.
And so I get to a mode where I can't shut myself up, but I'm also thinking, fool, shut up, because you're either looking guilty or you're going to make the situation escalate. But sometimes I've got to be honest. Sometimes it's hard for me to shut myself up.
And it's okay to ask that. It's okay to say, officer, why are you asking me all these questions? And then, a good officer, and we have a lot of good officers on MP, they're going to respond by saying, these are just, preliminary questions that I'm not accusing you of anything, but these are just questions that we have to have for our report writings and just for, for data entry stuff and things like that.
And I can ask that, Corey.
Yeah.
Okay, because the first time I got pulled over, now this is years ago, like not far from the church, a couple blocks away. This is when we had something called Blue Blanket. They pulled me over, rolled my window down, and I said, can you tell me why you stopped me?
Yeah.
And he said, I can't tell you anything after we run your plates. So there was one police officer that was running the plates and another who was standing about a car length behind my car with his hand covering his weapon. This is in the early 90s.
Okay.
So he would not answer any of my questions. But years later, when I was pulled over in a church parking lot, they stopped me. Again, I was not cited for anything at that first stop. Second stop, when they pulled me over, I didn't even ask why, because my experience before says they can't talk to you until after they run stuff. But
That's not true.
But Kevin, who's one of my pastors, got out of his car, walked over to the police officer. They didn't say, stop, get in your car, show me your ID. I mean, I've been trailing my wife where she was speeding and they stopped her on some street. She didn't know she wasn't supposed to get out of the car. We were running late someplace. She was trailing me. So I'm parked. She's behind me. She opens the door. I'm thinking, oh, my God, what is she doing? Because as a black male, I know you don't get out.
Right.
She got out and walked over to the police car. He said, get in your car. What are you doing? But when Kevin, who was white, got out of his car and walked up on the police officers in a dark parking lot, they started jaw-jacking. They asked Kevin if I was who I said I was. They didn't ask for ID. They didn't ask him what he was doing there. They didn't even ask him his name. They were standing there laughing and talking while they ran my plates.
Wow. Yeah. And every situation is going to vary and going to be different depending on the officer. But if that were me on that stop and Kevin walked up to me, I would have told him to get back in his car.
That's what I thought. That's what messed my head up, that he walked out of his car like 50 yards away and he just walked up to them, because he kind of walks methodically and slow.
Yeah.
They didn't say, sir. I mean, when they yelled at my wife, it's not funny, but it surprised her that the officer yelled, that she stopped and physically started shaking in the street and got back in her car because he just thought, what's this woman about to do? Kevin walked up on him in the dark. So let me, this is crazy. If that happens again, and I hope it doesn't, do I have to let down my window all the way when the police officer tells me to, or state trooper?
That is, if you get pulled over again, I mean, you just let down your window enough to communicate.
But I don't have to let it all the way down?
Well,
not that I wouldn't, but I'm just curious.
Sure, I would say let down your window to communicate. Here's what I would say to that. Don't be confrontational.
Right.
Don't unnecessarily be confrontational where those people that you see the video where the cop pulls them over, cop walks up to the car and they let their window down an inch and the cop's like, can I see your driver's license? Sir, why am I pulled over? I don't have the right, I don't have to show you my driver's license. Well, actually, the one thing we got to do, because people always say, I know my rights. Well, okay, great. If you know your rights, then make sure that when you are pulled over, that you fully understand that if he's pulling you over for a legal reason, you do have to provide your driver's license.
Sure.
And why roll your window down for like an inch, a half an inch, and then start to say how you're not going to give him your driver's license.
While you're filming it.
While you're filming and you're pulled over for a legal reason. You're making a pretty mundane situation much worse.
You're helping to escalate it.
Right. For no reason.
You don't have to do that.
So, no, roll your window down.
Do I have to get out? If they say, so you step. Now, again, if I know I'm not drinking, I don't smell like alcohol, I'm not swerving. If an officer says for any reason, get out your car, do I have to get out my car?
An officer does have the right to order you out of the
your
vehicle.
car. Okay.
If he's on a legal traffic stop or with you for whatever reason,
Okay.
he does have the right to ask you to step out of your vehicle if he wants. And a lot of times, sometimes officers do that to see how nervous you're going to be, but in this day and age, most people are going to be nervous anyway. Now, they do not have the right to search the car or anything like that or go that far. But yeah, an officer does have a right to ask you to step out of the car. But I would say in that situation, if you're pulled over again like that, just be cool, like you are, just engage in conversation with the officer. I'm trusting and hoping that you won't have an experience like your first one, that you'll have better experiences. And many officers,
and again, they weren't rude, but they just, the first time wasn't forthcoming, and second time they just talked to my staff member.
Absolutely.
But at neither time, and that's a credit to the police officers here. Neither time they were rude. I just didn't understand
right and
what was going on,
and
I've never been cited for anything. So lights not out, wrong turn, no signaling. I've just been pulled over.
I think what's most helpful is when officers explain, I pulled you over for XYZ. Sorry, I pulled you over because you turned right when that light was red. Is there any reason why you did that? I mean, if you start the conversation out with just being upfront, telling them what happened, that really helps, to engage in that conversation and things like that, and you can kind of keep things down,
Sure. Is it wise or unwise to just start recording if I see a police officer having a strange or a heated confrontation with someone? Am I putting myself at risk if I'm standing across the street, they pull over?
No, that's
my right.
That's your right.
Can I be ordered to turn my phone off? Because in a lot of these officers say turn that phone off.
There's an update that just came out to our department not too long, a few weeks ago, reminding officers, and I think for the most part our officers already knew this.
Sure.
Just because nationally they're reminding officers that we can be recorded. The citizen does have a right to record us.
Okay.
Now with that being said, be prepared for us to record you. So now what I started doing to my record, okay, I'm gonna go on my phone and record. You can't record me. Why not? You record me. So to answer your question, no, record away. Record all you want.
Inside my car too. If I'm pulled over and it starts to get weird, I can have my passenger. I can say, "Hey, baby, turn the phone on."
That is your right. If you want to record away. I tell people all the time, I have no problem with you recording me.
Because you're gonna abide by.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're recording me or not, I'm gonna do my job in a professional manner in a way that's gonna with dignity and respect. So I don't have a problem with being recorded. But like a lot of times when the protests were going on in downtown and police were being recorded, officers, we were there recording people too, because it's one thing when you record us because you think we're doing something wrong, but it's another thing when we record you when you're also doing something wrong in your behavior.
Because that's evidence, right?
It's not only if it's evidence, just the mere fact of just showing you this is how you were behaving,
right?
As a person, just not even just to charge or arrest you, but
just out
this
the
is
box.
how you look.
This is how you talking.
This
how you're looking.
This is how disrespectful you were being to me. We're human beings too.
Do you you got a young son? He's a preteen. Is he a preteen,
13,
teenager? How do you prepare him to interact with police officers? Or how to view? Let me see. How do you prepare him to view law enforcement?
It's interesting that you say that, because Caleb had a choice to go to Verona High School or to West High School. Both high schools have police in the school,
right?
And I know the West system. I know the ERO program, obviously, because I was ERO, so I know what their approach is.
And that's an educational resource officer, right?
So automatically, I want Caleb to go to West High School,
right?
Because I know in Madison, what we were doing with our EROs is really to promote restorative practices,
yes,
promote education.
You all have hired really good EROs.
And so that's what we're trying to do. I don't know Verona's system.
Sure.
I don't know, and there's a lot of places that whole school-to-prison pipeline can be very real. I don't believe Madison or West High School, especially when I was there, is one of them. But I don't know if something can happen where all of a sudden Caleb didn't understand something, and next thing you know, he's getting charged with a felony. Because I just don't trust that. So
because schools are where a lot of students are entering into the criminal justice system. Not saying kids aren't acting out, but that is the downside of having officers. That probably things that we would just get sent home for, to the principal's office for.
It depending on how that program is run. Mm-hmm. If the ERO program is run right, then there's going to be a many buffers before the person gets to the police, and then even when they get to the police officer is going to have a lot of resources to refer that person right back to the community,
so that they're not into that system.
And the whole objective is to not even ever write their name down, to not ever enter their name into a computer,
right.
keep them out of the system. And so in many ways, and I tried to explain this on the Cap Times panel, in many ways, police officers in our Madison schools are a buffer to the criminal justice system, not a conduit, as many suggest.
That's really helpful to know. Yeah. So they're trained right there. If they're real good EROs,
right,
educational resource officers, they're that buffer so that we can cut down on the pipeline from schools to prisons.
Absolutely.
Because we have that pipeline here in Madison, but in that role for 4 years, you help to keep kids
right, and that's I can come back on and talk in detail about every program, everything that was set up.
I would like to do that
because that people really need to hear that. But it's a lot though.
No, you're right. So. You're right. In fact, I would love to continue this conversation with the shooting of Tony Robinson here in Madison. I think Madisonians swore that nothing like that could ever happen. Do you feel like that changed the department and how it thinks about policing? I mean, I know we were watching Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, other people around the country, but just did it sober up the police department? What was the major shift, attitudinal shift or environmental shift that you felt within the department after the showdown, or is it business as usual in your opinion?
I do think that it made some changes. I do think that it got the department to thinking about, for example, and I'm just gonna put it out there. I don't know if this was a direct result of Tony Robinson, but I know it came shortly after that. There was the idea that it's policy now that officers must wait for backup. I think
that is a result.
So,
but that's important because that would have made a difference in that scenario. I think waiting would have made a difference.
I agree. I agree in that scenario.
Now, my brother's an officer in Illinois.
Sure,
they cannot go on that long because after the Tony Robinson situation, I called him and he said, "Well, I won't comment on what an officer should or shouldn't do." So that's what he said to me. But he said, where he's on patrol, he could not have gone into that scenario alone.
Absolutely,
he had to wait for backup.
And I think it keeps officers safe, but it also prevents and accountable, and it just prevents things from, because when you have more numbers, then you have access to a variation of uses of force.
Right.
To where if it's two officers and one of you. We can just fight or something because you're double teamed in a sense.
Right.
I don't have to resort to a weapon.
Exactly. Exactly.
So things like that. And so, again, as far as specifically what happened inside the house between that officer and Tony Robinson, I don't know. I wasn't there, and only those two know Tony Robinson is no longer here. Then only that officers know. So as I can't say that what happened was right or wrong. What I can say is that I do believe that the result of that was that that was one of the main reasons why there's this backup policy, in my opinion.
Right.
In my opinion, which is good policy. I do think that.
It helps you and the citizens. I mean that helps that officer, and that helps the person who's causing the disturbance, and people get a chance to go home. I mean, remember a couple of years back, that same day that Tony was shot, there was a person that shot around at officers on the west side of town, but that person went home alive. I think that was an African American person as well, but it was more than one.
Was he African American?
I think so. I don't know. We have to look into that. We'll talk about
that. If you're talking about the same, I remember a guy who shot some rounds from
an apartment building.
It was from like a AK-47, which is an assault rifle.
And they talked the person.
They were able to talk him down.
But that was a white assailant or a white person. Well,
I thought, but I don't want to misspeak. I thought it was, but he could have been black. But
the officers talked them down. What happens is it was more than one officer.
But the SWAT team was there. They had negotiators there,
and they were able to turn the whole scenario
right. And so Tony Robinson's situation is unique in the sense that officers are driven by this, what's called this update and call notes. So officers are driven by this update and call notes. So what happens is, if we're going to a call, officer so and so, he now punched somebody in the gas station parking lot. He's now running down the street with his shirt off. And these are all how the call notes were coming out to he's now going this, and now he's attacking his friends and going. So there was updates, regular updates for that officer as he was going there that could have made him believe, I need to go in and act right now, or otherwise somebody's going to be hurt.
Situation's escalating.
Because the situation is
Very
escalating,
dangerous.
and so he's the thoughts are going through his mind. There's someone in that house that this person is hurting. I have to go in.
Sure.
And his call notes, the updates that he was getting, led him to react in that way. So you got to kind of also put yourself in the officer's shoes and see what he was like thinking to just go in like that. But that's why this policy kind of just deads all of that.
That's good to know. I didn't know that was a policy. You know what?
Just came out.
I think people want to know more about what officers, particularly black officers, are thinking about scenarios and situations. So if you don't mind, from time to time, I'd love to have you back on the show. Not that I want other incidents to happen around the country, but I would love to get a professionals'
anytime
perspective. And so I really want to thank my guest today, Officer Corey Saffold with the Madison Police Department, for being on my show today, for being a guest of Black Like Me. And this gentleman is a national speaker. He's created this organization where he goes around talking to people about community safety. So if you go to alexg.com, you can leave me a note. I'll put you in touch with Officer Saffold if you want him to perhaps offer keynotes. Is it all right if I put your business out there?
Absolutely,
So because our listenership is from all around the country.
Sure.
If you want someone to come in, particularly from mid-sized cities, to talk about policing and safety and community relations, leave me a note. Contact me through our website, and I will make sure that I will put you in touch with Officer Saffold and get you his email. So, hey, thank you for listening in. I want you to tell your friends about this show. As I told you, we're going to help you to understand, or at least to take a different look at American life through the lens of one, maybe two black men at a time. So keep listening in, and we want to keep giving you things to think about. This is Dr. Alex G, and I've been your host.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.